Top 5 best current marriages in college football. I started doing this list, and then, if you go back to a bygone era, it would have been really hard to do things like Bobby Bowden and Tom Osborne and all that, because there's a ton of guys who were at places it was their program for a long time, and that's just not the case anymore. And I don't know how you, especially when you look at, again, the what is now a bygone era of college athletics, really, how you, I don't know, how you compare it fairly, So I said, I'm just going to scrap it, and I'll do the current ones. So number 5, Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. Look, it's not always, this is maybe the most realistic to any relationship that's long-term ever.
And these are good marriages, to be clear?
It's good, I'm telling you. Look, here's why. And this is why I picked Mike Gundy, and hear my, explanation on this. It's not always peaches and cream. And right now, I would say that the last year or so has not been peaches and cream for Oklahoma State. But they're together. They're in it together. They and Mike Gundy have committed to each other long term, and they're going to work it out. And I'm of the belief that Mike Gundy will have Oklahoma State winning again pretty consistently on the other side of getting out of all this. Now, the one thing I do wonder about Mike Gundy and this particular marriage is just him as a person. When does he get tired of the way that college athletics is now and say, well, I'm retired because I've got more money than I'll ever need, I don't want to do this. But this one has stood the test of time so far, even though it gets rocky in spots.
Yeah,
you can disagree. Feel free, yeah.
Because you're right. It's made it through some really rough patches. It's lasted a while. It's gone on far longer than most other marriages in college football. The problem I have, Paul, and the reason why I basically disagree is that he's tried to cheat and leave multiple times now.
Okay,
and
I did
the
not
other
account
side
for that.
has not followed through with their side of it, but he's sniffed around multiple times and just never latched on with any other program, wife, whatever. So that's where I slightly, because he's tried to leave the marriage. He's tried to leave it, and that's been more than once. And so, that's, you look on the surface though, it's one of the, it is like marriages. You look on the surface hey, looks fine. They're winning games most of the time, and okay, you hit a little rough patch as part of it, but you look a little further into his text messages on his phone, and there's a lot of ADs in there, Yeah. So that's why I pause when you say that. But, I mean, it's worked out for a long time. And
that's a good point. Now, I will say this, but he has not been able to do that. So Mike Gundy is the guy who's tried to, but just can't close the deal.
Yeah, so he gets credit for not actually cheating, even though he's tried to cheat, basically.
Yeah, he's in a very nebulous.
Let's not award anything for that.
He's in a nebulous area.
Yeah, he's in an area where – it could have gone real bad, but it's stayed together for better or worse. I mean, maybe you look at it as though he could have and he didn't, but I don't know. I think if one of those others had said yes at some point in time, then you may have seen this marriage end long ago. But it's been a long time. I mean, I never would have thought when I saw spiky hair, brash Mike Gundy back in the day that, all these years later, he would still be sitting around Stillwater, winning games and playing for a title just a couple years back, nearly getting in the playoff. We almost forget that now at this stage, don't we? That they were nearly in the playoff 2 years ago, if not for that loss to Baylor. So, yeah.
Yeah, Wet Blanket, big Oklahoma State fan, said it is a great marriage. He loves us and we love him. Okay,
great.
All right, there we go. Number 4, Kyle Whittingham. People may not realize, Urban Meyer was the coach at Utah. He left, and they have not changed since then. Kyle Whittingham took over, has done a great job. This is the perfect personality for university. He's, at this point, grizzled as hell as a head coach, winning back-to-back conference titles, working out. Now, the only problem Utah has is when he decides to retire, because really everything's worked out for him. He's found a great niche for them. And again, the conference around might be problematic overall, but I mean, they're the class of the Pac-12 the last 2 years. So
it's amazing. When he retires, they join the Big 12. They hire Kingsbury. They're going air raid. He's been a guy who's had an incredible amount of longevity, to be sure. I mean, it's amazing. I was in high school when he was, when he was first starting out, and that's. I don't know, nobody even knows me basically, but for me that feels like a really long time ago. And so to think that one guy in college sports, especially in football, with as much turnover as there is, has lasted that amount of time is pretty incredible. And he's won a lot of big games. Obviously won some Pac-12 titles here of late. You know, it is weird, though, to see them kind of celebrate the Rose Bowl burst when they haven't won that. Like, you know, like it's celebrate. Like, I guess that's part of progress and making steps. I'm not knocking it entirely, but almost like certain members of the, you know how everybody's got their certain ones that are not. Don't paint us all with that same brush, but there are certain members of the Utah fan base that paint that, and you would think that they won those Rose Bowls when in fact they did not. But it was a big deal to get there, and they've had great years. I mean, they've won a bunch of games with him and had a lot of big moments. So, yeah, I think I got all the respect for Kyle Whittingham. And, look, I don't know everybody else's situations, in terms of flirtations and rumors and all that. Like, I know Mike Gundy, for example, having, been in the Big 12 this entire time. But he seems like he's as much of a Utah guy as there possibly could be, and he's been incredible there.
Yep. Number 3. Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern. Look, they don't win all that often, but when they do have a good season, it's due in large part to what he's done there. So they have academic hurdles that are difficult to overcome, and that you've got to be a damn good student to be at Northwestern. And they're going to recruit a certain type of athlete, like Stanford is, like a lot of some of those schools are. But he's an alum. He gets it. He stood the test of time. There appears to be no groundswell for getting rid of him. So, this is one that's worked in spite of a lot of really blah seasons, but they've had some really good ones under him too. And I think Northwestern, as an athletic department, understands that you're probably going to have ebbs and flows of getting those right kind of guys who are elite enough to, win at the Big Ten level, and then also, stay competitive academically in your school, and they don't mess with their coaches all that much.
Yeah, it seems like they kind of go through a couple years cycle where there's a couple years where they're like not even a bowl team, and then they'll pop up and win, 8 games, even like 9 games a few years back, and then they'll go back and they'll win like 4, 5. Last year, 1, and they've won a total of 4 in the last 2 years. I think even for their standards, that's a little bit not great.
Yeah, he probably needs that to come around.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about that situation. Like if that to even mention, I'm not mentioning a hot seat, but like I don't even know at what point with that situation, with the mentality of like that fan base and that school, of like what would it take to then actually say like, you know what, there's like we might need to like look at something here. I don't even know if that's even feasible, or if it's like Kirk Ferentz at Iowa, where it's like that's never going to happen until he decides. I don't know that, but I do feel like, without that knowledge, just looking from an outsider perspective, yes, you ebb and flow, and there are some times where, hey, you don't make a bowl game for a couple years, but inevitably, over the course of his career, they've bounced back after 2 years or so. They need to bounce back, I feel like, after the last couple of years with the low win totals. And, now it's a whole brave new world, right, with the LA schools. I don't know exactly how that changes expectations at all or not, but yeah, he's been there for a really long time, done a great job overall with the program, also has had his fair share of big moments as well, and it seems like people love him. So correct me if I'm wrong on that, but yeah, in that regard, all seems well. He just would like to have maybe a little bit more winning here pretty soon, because it hasn't been great the last couple years.
No, absolutely not. Number 2, Kirby Smart at Georgia. And yes, Paxton, I did accidentally leave Dabo Sweeney off this list, but maybe it's for spite. But yeah, that's a really good one. But Kirby Smart at Georgia. This one fairly new, but it was a really good decision. It's working out for everybody. You can't say anything what's other than some off the field stuff that's not good at Georgia right now. But look, they are rolling. And this is the class of college football. Georgia, the back-to-back national champions. Kirby has convinced Georgia to give him twice the recruiting budget that even Alabama has, where he came from. And, he's an alum back at his alma mater, doing what they couldn't do for 40 years. Yeah, this is near perfect.
Yeah, it's been pretty dadgum good, and I do want to go back to Pat Fitzgerald, because I said that every couple years saying they had that run from 15 to 18 that was pretty dadgum spectacular, and I'm sure he's probably got a lot of a lot of leeway as a result of that. And earlier in his tenure, he had a great run too. So this lately has been more of a downtrend and outside of the standard than what typically has been. And man, more that I look at it, like he's done a hell of a job in Northwestern. Like even more, I knew he did, but even more so. I thought there was some more dips than there were, but that's mostly been recently. So yeah, I mean that's a great marriage, and they won the division a couple of times. So I'm sure the last couple of years are like water off a duck's back, and he'd have to drop a lot further. But it will be interesting in this new era of sort of what the expectations are. But yeah, Kirby Smart. I mean, like everything he's done, he's amazing. I don't know where you would point to if you were looking at cracks in the foundation. It seems all pretty strong. Seems like the relationship's going well, and I don't know really much what else you could ask for, quite frankly, if you're the other side of this Georgia marriage than what he's done already.
Yeah, absolutely. And number one, Nick Saban. Look, it was absolutely perfect when it happened. It was great timing on his part Look, he was at the Dolphins. They didn't sign Drew Brees. He and his wife decided they wanted to get back in college anyway. The Alabama job was open. Boom. And history has been made, and he's become the greatest college football coach of all time in that period. And look, you would think that Bama and almost anybody who can walk and chew gum would be great, but they've had three great coaches in their history: Bear Bryant, Gene Stallings, and Nick Saban. And Nick Saban is better even than the Bear in an era where he has advantages now that Bear Bryant didn't have, but also for the first part of it, he had a big disadvantage compared to what Bear Bryant could do. There was no scholarship limit, when Bear Bryant was the coach, and he has 85 scholarships, more teams just flooding that and getting after him. No one's been more consistent. No one's been greater in the history of college football. No one has more national titles. And Nick Saban it was a perfect marriage, which is why he was never going to Texas. I'm just throwing that in for the
I heard he was looking for houses. That's what I remember
that was
reading.
Message board lies.
I remember that.
What that was.
Pat, right? And then his wife's name, Pat, I think.
Yep.
Pat was rolling around Austin, from
Lake
what I
Travis.
Travis.
remember. Yep, that's what I remember.
Loves Lake Travis.
The
It's the place she's always wanted to be. Look,
I typically give what I think are sometimes on occasion, maybe like twice a year, I give away what I feel is like a pretty good idea, and sometimes that idea may already exist. Winsipedia is a great tool for like comparing schools, right? Football wise, is there a version on that website for coaches? Because here's a free idea, because I'm certainly not going to just go put the work in, and like I don't know how to even begin doing that, but it would be cool to be able to pull up like Nick Saban versus Bear Bryant and then have it listed where it's like national titles, conference titles, all-time wins, just like we can do with Alabama and Georgia, and we can see their head-to-head all-time and all of that. That would be a cool little addition, or an addition somewhere else in my mind. I don't know what you guys think, but that'd be cool. Because you can just pull up Urban versus Saban and like, all right, he's got 7 of this and he's got 6 of that, and it would maybe even be more interesting than the team some of the times.
Yeah. No, and look, Urban Meyer could very well have been on this list if he was
faithful in his marriage.
Yeah, exactly. If he was like Nick Saban was, where it's not, and I know it's a little bit about Nick Saban, but it's not really about Nick Saban.
Right.
It's kind of about Urban Meyer, where he is. Urban and Dion are similar in that regard.
Yeah, maybe faithful's not the right. I don't know what you would describe it. It's just I'm trying to use the wedding theme here, and he's obviously gone out of bounds on a few occasions. So however you would want to categorize that, I was just throwing that as a loose way to say wrongdoing that would cause the relationship to crumble. But whatever it is that he does, where he finds himself where he does.
Yeah, because I think when it comes to organization and football coaching skill and all those things, Urban Meyer is one of the best. Where he and Nick Saban differ is that Nick doesn't get lost in the weeds of some of the stuff that Urban did. But look, Urban's won 3 national titles and he was really good. But Nick, it's just the best. I mean, I know people don't like him because he wins all the time, but for Christ's sake, he's just so good.
Yeah, he is, and that's what makes me think of that Winsipedia ideas of being able to do a coaches, because there is that Saban versus Bear, and let's pull it up and see, like, side by side, all the categories ranked for who has the most of everything or the best of everything, and that'd be cool to be able to just pop up just like that, or Urban versus Sark, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, he's arguably the GOAT. Some people aren't ready to put him there yet, but like when all is said and done, hard to imagine he's not going to win a little bit more before he goes. And I don't know who he won't possibly jump by the time it's all said and done. But
yeah, I mean, maybe overall wins he's not going to catch Paterno or whatever. Like maybe he doesn't, but we'll see how that goes. But he's got more of those trophies and rings than anybody else. Thank you, retired stockbroker, for the 10.